Renaud walked through the narrow, poorly maintained streets of his community, his headphones being his only way to isolate himself from the chaos around him. The afternoon heat caused the uneven asphalt to emit heat waves, which only made the walk to school more tiring. Despite this, Renaud never let himself get down. He was known for his kindness and politeness, qualities that seemed rare in the environment in which he lived. He knew that life there was not easy, and sooner or later, he would need to find a way to escape the cycle of poverty and violence that engulfed so many around him. At school, things weren't much better. Renaud was constantly teased and humiliated by some of his classmates, who never missed an opportunity to remind him of his financial situation. Wearing his worn-out uniform, he tried to go unnoticed in the hallways, but there was always a malicious comment or laugh. "Look at Renaud. He's already worn out his shoes from walking so much," someone once said. He knew that his mother did her best to keep the household running with the small business she owned, but the money was never enough. Renaud tried as much as possible not to let it get him down, but the words hurt. His refuge was music and books. Whenever he could, he would take refuge in the pages of a story or in the beats of a song that would take him away from there, even if only for a few minutes. He dreamed of a better future, but these dreams, as beautiful as they were, often seemed too far from reality. Each day was a struggle to keep hope alive, and as time went by, this seemed to become increasingly difficult. However, no matter how much the world tried to show him otherwise, Renaud never stopped believing that kindness had its place. For him, the important thing was to do the right thing, even if no one was paying attention. That afternoon, the sun was even more relentless than usual. Renaud was returning from school, exhausted, feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders. As he walked back home, he saw something that caught his attention. A man in a wheelchair, apparently struggling to climb a steep hill. The wheelchair looked old and the climb was impossible. Without thinking twice, Renaud took off his headphones and ran to him. "Let me help you, sir," Renaud said, gripping the chair's handles and pushing firmly. The man, who appeared to be in his 50s, looked at him with a grateful smile. "Thanks, kid. I was just about to give up," the man said, his voice soft but tired. Renaud pushed the chair to the top of the hill and made sure the man was in a comfortable position before stopping. "It was nothing," Renaud replied humbly. "I pass by here all the time, so if you need help, you can count on me." The man smiled once more, but this time his gaze was deeper, as if he was assessing the boy in front of him. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Renaud," he replied promptly. "And yours?" "I'm Mauricio. I live nearby. It's hard to leave the house often, but there are days when I can't avoid it." Renaud nodded, not paying much attention to the conversation. He was used to helping others without expecting anything in return, whether it was an old lady carrying heavy bags or a child who needed help with a task. Mr. Mauricio seemed no different, just another person facing his own challenges. "You're a good boy, Renaud. The world needs more people like you," Mr. Mauricio said, almost enigmatically. Before Renaud could respond, the man thanked him again and went on his way. Renaud stood there for a few moments, watching Mr. Mauricio walk away. Something about that meeting seemed different, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Either way, for Renaud, helping people was simply what you did. He put his headphones back in his ears and continued on his way, never imagining how that small gesture of kindness would change his life forever. The following days were full of routine for Renaud, but he couldn't get the encounter with Mr. Mauricio out of his head. Whenever he passed by the same street, he looked for the man in the hope of seeing him again. It wasn't long before, on a sultry afternoon, he found him once again, trying to maneuver his wheelchair between the potholed sidewalks. "Mr. Mauricio, do you need help again?" Renaud asked, approaching without hesitation. The man smiled when he saw him and nodded. Renaud, with his natural and helpful attitude, pushed the chair once more, taking Mr. Mauricio to the top of the slope. This time, the conversation went on a little longer. Renaud and Mr. Mauricio started seeing each other frequently, and at each meeting, the man made a point of asking about the boy's life. "And school, how is it going?" he would always ask, interested in what Renaud had to say. Little by little, Renaud began to open up more, sharing his difficulties at school, the humiliations he faced, and the dreams he had for the future. Mr. Mauricio listened attentively, always offering a word of comfort or simple but meaningful advice. He never revealed too much about himself, always preferring to listen to Rena's story. The boy, in turn, felt lighter when talking to this man. There was something in Mr. Mauricio's words that brought a sense of calm, as if, for the first time, someone from the outside truly understood his challenges. One day, Rena commented on the constant humiliation he suffered at school. "Sometimes it seems like I'll never get out of this," he said, frustrated. "My mother does what she can, but it's hard. And at school, others always have something to say about me." Mr. Mauricio, in his calm tone, replied, "Life can be hard, Rena, but you are stronger than you think. Don't let other people's words define who you are. The world is much bigger than these school walls." Rena absorbed those words with a mix of hope and skepticism. He wanted to believe that there was something beyond what he knew, but reality always seemed to pull him back to the ground. Even so, he kept meeting Mr. Mauricio, increasingly certain that those conversations were bringing something new into his life. Maybe it was the beginning of a friendship he didn't even know he needed. Weeks passed, and meetings with Mr. Mauricio became an expected part of Rena's routine. He became accustomed to helping him climb the hills, and the conversations they shared became increasingly deeper. However, no matter how much they talked, Rena knew almost nothing about Mauricio's past. The questions he asked always received vague answers, as if the man was hiding something. One day, after one of these conversations, Rena casually mentioned his dream of studying music, and perhaps one day leaving the community and building a better life. Mr. Mauricio, normally calm, seemed more interested than usual. "Do you play any instruments?" he asked. "I play the guitar," Rena replied with a hint of pride. "My mother got me an old one, and I've been teaching myself. But I wish I had more opportunities, you know? I don't know if I'll make it out of here." Mr. Mauricio watched him for a few seconds in silence, and then, with an enigmatic look, he said, "Maybe I know someone who can help you. Would you be willing to meet with him?" Rena, a little confused, didn't know what to say at the moment. Mr. Mauricio had never mentioned knowing anyone who could offer him help, but something in the way he spoke suggested that he was serious. The boy, hesitant but curious, nodded. "Yes, of course. I would accept." The following days were filled with anticipation for Rena. He tried to imagine who this person could be and how he could help him with his dreams. Perhaps it was an acquaintance of Mr. Mauricio, someone with influence. However, he had no idea how surprising this revelation would be. When the day of the meeting arrived, Rena found Mr. Mauricio in his usual place, but this time he was not alone. A well-dressed man with an imposing posture stood beside him. Rena was disconcerted. The stranger smiled and greeted the boy with a firm handshake. "So you are the young man Mr. Mauricio spoke so much about?" said the man, clearly impressed. Mr. Mauricio, then, with a more serious tone than usual, revealed, "Rena, this is Mr. Carlos. He owns a foundation that helps promising young people with musical talent." "I told him about you." Rena was paralyzed. That unexpected encounter seemed surreal, and he couldn't believe that someone like Mr. Mauricio, always so simple and discreet, could have that kind of connection. Rena was still trying to process what he had just heard. Mr. Mauricio, the man he had helped without any great pretensions, had spoken about him to such an important person. He looked at Mr. Carlos, who was still smiling in a welcoming way, and then at Mr. Mauricio, trying to understand how all of this was possible. "I don't know what to say," Rena stammered, still surprised. "You don't have to say anything, kid," Mr. Mauricio replied, his voice now carrying an authority that Rena hadn't noticed before. "Mr. Carlos and I have talked, and we think you deserve a chance to show your talent. He runs a music school for young people like you, with potential but no opportunities." Rena could hardly believe what he was hearing. "But why are you doing this for me?" he asked, confused. It was at this point that Mr. Mauricio, who had been reserved about his own life until then, began to reveal parts of his story. "Rena, what you did for me went beyond pushing a wheelchair. You showed empathy, something that many people today forget. I was a businessman for many years before I had an accident that left me this way. I had power and influence, but I lost almost everything. What I was left with was the recognition that true kindness is rare. When you showed up, I saw in you someone who was not interested in who I was or what I could offer you. You just wanted to help." Renan remained silent, absorbing those words. He would never have imagined that Mr. Mauricio had had a life so different from what he seemed. "I didn't know," Renan said, his voice low. "I know I didn't know," Mr. Mauricio replied with a smile. "But life is full of surprises, and sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who can make the most difference." Mr. Carlos interrupted the conversation with an excited tone. "So, Renan, what do you think about holding an audition? We have open positions at the foundation, and I believe you could be one of the stars we're looking for." Renan felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. The opportunity he had always dreamed of was right in front of him, and as scary as it was, he knew he couldn't waste it. With a shy smile, he accepted the invitation. "I'll do it," he said, with determination. "I'll do my best." That week, Renan could barely sleep. The anxiety of the audition took over his thoughts, and each night seemed longer than the last. His mother noticed his agitation, but he preferred not to say anything until he was sure it wasn't a dream. The guitar, which had previously been just a way to escape, now seemed like his ticket to a better future. When the day of the audition arrived, Renan was nervous but determined. Mr. Carlos had arranged the meeting at a music school, a large and imposing building, very different from the modest spaces Renan was familiar with. Upon entering, he was greeted kindly by the staff, but the butterflies in his stomach grew with each step. He was led into a small room with a simple stage. There, 3 people sat, including Mr. Carlos. "Make yourself comfortable, Renan," he said with an encouraging smile. "Play whatever you feel most comfortable with." Renan took a deep breath, placed the guitar on his lap, and began to play. The first chords were a little shaky, but as his fingers glided over the strings, he calmed down, losing himself in the melody. Renan played a song he had composed alone, a song full of emotion, which expressed the struggles and dreams he carried. When he finished, the room fell silent for what seemed like an eternity. Then Mr. Carlos clapped his hands, followed by the other members of the panel. "Renan, that was extraordinary," Mr. Carlos said, standing up to greet him. Renan, his heart still racing, didn't know what to say. I just tried to show what I feel when I play," he murmured. "You did more than that," said one of the other judges. "You touched us with your music. And that's exactly what we need here." Mr. Carlos smiled at Renan and, with a hand on the boy's shoulder, said, "If you want it, the position is yours. We will work to develop your talent. We have resources, teachers, and a community that will support you in whatever you need." Renan could hardly believe it. All his insecurities and fears seemed to have dissipated with those words. He accepted the offer, still trying to process the huge turn his life was about to take. As he left the school, Renan found Mr. Mauricio waiting for him outside. "I knew you could do it, kid," the man said, with the same serene smile as always. "This is just the first of many doors that will open for you." Renan looked at Mr. Mauricio with gratitude and, for the first time, felt that all the effort and humiliation he had suffered were being rewarded. He had found a new path, and this time, he had allies by his side. Renan's life began to change rapidly after his audition. He joined the music school and began taking regular lessons with experienced teachers. With each new lesson, he felt more confident and inspired, but also overwhelmed. There was immense pressure to live up to the expectations of not only his new mentors, but also his own. The classes were intense, and Renan tried his best to adapt. He spent hours practicing, but with that, he also began to feel the social pressure. His schoolmates, who had previously been responsible for his insecurities, now became a constant reminder of how his life was changing. While they were having fun, he dedicated himself to rehearsing and improving his talent. The teasing he had faced before seemed to return with full force. One afternoon, on his way back from music school, Renan met a group of boys on the corner who used to make fun of him. "Look, if it isn't the famous guitarist," one of them shouted, while the others laughed. Renan's blood boiled. He remembered Mr. Mauricio's words about not letting other people's opinions affect him, but the truth was that he still struggled with it. "Leave him alone," said a firm voice that Renan recognized. It was Mr. Mauricio, who was passing by. He approached and placed himself between Renat and the boys, his gaze serious and determined. "If you have something to say, let it be something that builds, not destroys." The boys were surprised and stepped back, but Renat's words still echoed in their minds. Mr. Mauricio noticed the tension in the boy, and after the boys had moved away, he began to talk to him. "Renat, what you are doing is incredible. Don't let yourself be put down by those who can't see your true worth. Music is your voice, and you should use it to express yourself, not to respond to provocations." Mr. Mauricio's words resonated with Renat, who began to understand that. In order to truly overcome his insecurities, he needed to focus on his personal growth rather than external criticism. Although the pressure was intense, he decided that he would not let the fear of what others thought stop him. Instead, he would use it to fuel his passion for music. Over time, Renat began to excel at music school. His technique improved, and he began performing in small concerts, growing increasingly confident in his ability. He realized that he had a voice that deserved to be heard, and that the humiliations of the past could not define his future. As the months passed, Renat not only became more skilled as a musician, but also more confident. He performed in several small school shows, and each performance was a rewarding experience. However, the true proof of his growth would come in the form of a large concert hosted by the music school, where the students would have the opportunity to perform at a local theater. The idea of performing in such a large venue made Renat both excited and apprehensive. He knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the pressure of performing in front of such a large audience made him nervous. The days leading up to the show were filled with intense rehearsals, and the school staff made sure to support each student, ensuring they were ready for the big day. On the night of the show, Renat was nervous but also excited. The theater was packed, and he could feel the energy of the crowd pulsing around him. As the other students performed, Renat watched, feeling a mixture of admiration and apprehension. He wanted to stand out, but he couldn't shake the fear of failing. Finally, it was his turn. Renat took a deep breath, remembered Mr. Mauricio's words about the importance of using his music as his voice, and walked up to the stage. The spotlights were bright, and the audience seemed like a mass of indistinguishable faces. He picked up his guitar and began to play, allowing the music to transport him to a place where his insecurities could not reach him. As he played, Renat let his emotions flow through the music. He sang his heart out, his voice echoing in the theater. The energy of the audience changed. They were engaged, and at one point, Renat found himself smiling, lost in his own performance. He felt the connection he had with the music, and it freed him. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. Renat was stunned. He had done it. He had performed on a grand stage, and he had done it with authenticity. As he looked out at the smiling faces of the audience, he saw his mother among them, her eyes shining with pride. After the presentation, Mr. Carlos approached him. "You were amazing, Renat. That's the energy we need. I'm so proud of you." Renat smiled, a mixture of relief and happiness running through his body. He had surpassed not only the expectations of others, but also his own limitations. As he left the stage, he felt that something inside him had changed forever. He now understood that the difficulties of the past were no longer a burden to carry, but rather a part of his history that had made him stronger.